And to be honest with you, Burp Suite has been a tool that I have been avoiding for quite some time, mainly because I always saw myself as a coder. But now with the emergence of all these AI tools and vibe coding kind of taking the stage, I do have a bit of an existential crisis that's going on, and I want to protect myself in the future. Now that we've adjusted that header, let's go ahead and forward the request through to the server. And notice we have a success. User has been deleted. Here is the lightweight neat leather jacket for $1,337. Let me go ahead over into our proxy. Let me turn off interception, refresh the page, and notice now the price for this leather jacket is in fact $0. What's up, Code Crew? In this video, we are going to be exploring one of the best free resources to learn web security. So upon my research into bug bounties, I have noticed that there is a common trait to get good at Burp Suite. Now, if you're unaware, Burp Suite is a suite of comprehensive tools for web application security. It's a very popular choice for security professionals and bug bounty hunters. Okay, basically the software acts as a proxy. It can intercept requests. It can manipulate the payloads, the body, all these different things to try and find vulnerabilities within a web application. And to be honest with you, Burp Suite has been a tool that I have been avoiding for quite some time, mainly because I always saw myself as a coder. But now with the emergence of all these AI tools and vibe coding kind of taking the stage, I do have a bit of an existential crisis that's going on, and I want to protect myself in the future. Upon all this research and existential crisis, I have found a awesome free resource for you to play with, for you to go ahead and learn all of these valuable skills. And that is with Portswigger, who provides a free online web security training from the creators of Burp Suite. Yes, we're getting it right from the horse's mouth. Now, here is where you're going to go ahead and get started. It's in the Get Started tab. So the Get Started tab will have basically like the top view of everything that we're going to be covering. There's a lot, right? There's a lot. And first of all, you're going to want to go ahead and make an account. So I'm going to go ahead and log in real quick. Okay. And then coming in, once you're logged in, you'll go ahead into the Academy section. So the Academy is completely free. I'd imagine that the reason they are doing this is simply to promote their certification for their Burp Suite. But nonetheless, the free Academy that they provide is an awesome resource. So coming over into the Get Started tab, you will see that there is a 3-step process, which looks super simple, super easy for you to follow, but you will see that there is quite a bit of information for you to go through. Now, going into all the topics, you will see that there is predominantly 2 categories for you to study your web application security. First, you have server-side topics. These are going to be things on the back end, right? These are going to be vulnerabilities, exploits that are a result of poor coding practices, poor configuration on the server side. Now, on the second topic, we have client side, which is going to be vulnerabilities that are going to be as a result of things on the front end. Now, if you're a little bit fuzzy as to the difference between front end and back end, I would honestly recommend you go to a resource like TryHackMe before you come here, because if you don't understand how the client server model works, then a lot of the stuff may be too abstract for you to really get the full value out of it. But if you have a pretty solid understanding, you feel, of the client server model and how front end, back end systems work, then this is an excellent resource for you to go ahead and dive right in. Now, you will notice that there is a lot, right? Like just on the SQL injection section, there is 18 labs. And then you go into authentication, another 14. And labs are awesome because you're not only applying what you've learned, but it's also saving you all the time to set up the lab yourself. As you may be familiar on this channel, we go through a lot of labs here, and you have to actually follow my videos and the steps, the readmes or the instructions to get that lab going. And it can take some time. And if there's any misunderstandings or the way that your machine is configured differently from mine, there could be some hiccups, and it kind of gets in the way of the actual learning of that lab. So the fact that Portswigger is here just providing the labs and the education for free it's a huge win for you. I'm just going to go ahead and walk through it with you so you can have an understanding as to which approach may be right for you. So the first approach, okay, is going into the all topics. Click on the first one, just go through top to bottom. And we see here on this first topic of SQL injection, it very thoroughly explains how SQL injection works. So here you have this hacker who has crafted this payload, which goes through the web app, which creates this query on the back end, which gets parsed through the database, which dumps all the passwords and usernames into the response of the web app into the hands of the attacker, right? And it gets very in-depth. Notice that there is quite a bit of information, right? There's a lot of information, but in between the content, you will have some labs for you to solve. So I'll go ahead and show you this first one. You see I've already solved it, but let's go ahead and walk through so you can have understanding as to exactly how this would go. Okay, so it kind of gives you some tips, right? It says that the lab contains a SQL injection vulnerability in the product category filter. So when the user selects the category, the application carries out a SQL query like the following. And in order to solve the lab, we would perform a SQL injection attack that causes the application to display one or more unreleased products. Now, popping into the lab, we see this shop that has a very typical layout that you would expect from an e-commerce store. And here you can see we can refine our search to a category of accessories, to corporate gifts, to pets. And notice that every time I switch between these categories, over in the URL, we actually see the URL parameters changing, right? Let me go ahead and show you one more time. So currently we're on accessories, going over into gifts, right? It switches the category into gifts. Now this gifts is being placed inside of the query here. So we're looking to manipulate the query to where everything else following this is going to be negated or commented out. So first, I would need to close off this single quote to negate this single quote. So let's go ahead and add that single quote. And then to negate everything else that follows, we can use a double dash. And again, everything that I just talked about right here is covered inside of the topics here. Now, if you are still a little bit lost and you're not really sure how to approach it, just come through again, come watch through again. And we can see that there's actually the same exact example for our lab. Category is gifts and release equals 1. Here we see that in order to get past the and released, we can use this double dash, which will comment out everything following this field. So let's go ahead and try that payload. You can see we have the single quote, the double dash. Notice that there are 3 different gifts that are available for purchase that have been released. Now, when we deliver the payload in our URL, we can see that this time we have a 4th product that has appeared, the conversation controlling lemon. It's pretty funny. All right, so that's just the first lab amongst all this glorious, glorious content. And go through, read it all. Now, if you are looking for a more tailored learning path, fortunately, Portswigger has that for you. So coming back over into all topics, okay, you can see that at the top left, there is a tab called Learning Paths. And even here it says, if you want more guided support, please see our learning paths. So you can see that in the learning paths, we have a few different options. We have API testing, which I think is awesome. Web LLM attacks, I can't wait to get there. Some CSRF, clickjacking, and all these different types of vulnerabilities that you'll find in web applications. Now, I have personally found this to be a friendlier approach as it's not so much information being blasted at me. It has these different points that you can follow so you can actually see your progress without just being a big wall of text thrown at you. You know what I mean? So let me actually go back into the first section so we can kind of be on the same page here. So I'm going all the way to the top, all the way back into API recon. So here you can see talks about API recon, basically gathering information on an API, trying to discover its attack surface, shows you exactly how it would look inside of a GET request. And just coming through, reading it, notice it's a lot easier to digest than the example we saw from the SQL injection. Going through, we get to a lab. Okay, so this is going to be the second of 3 labs that we're going to cover in this video. Now we see here that to solve the lab, we will need to find the exposed API documentation and delete Carlos. So as we learned here in this wonderful Academy course, there are sometimes routes that we can access that are intended for developers to know how the API should be used. Okay, so if we were looking for documentation as a developer, we would go into one of these routes and then we would see, if I want to interact with the user's route, I would have a payload like this, or I would send this type of HTTP method. Going through all the content, leading you up into the lab, we will be well prepared to tackle this. So here we see, in order to solve this lab, you will need to know what API documentation is. You will need to know how it can be useful for an attacker, and then how to discover the documentation. So coming over into the lab, we see the same thing as before. We are looking to find API documentation. So if you're fuzzy, if you're a little bit lost on that, don't be afraid to go back and read through the Academy course, okay? And here you can see that there's different endpoints that we can refer to find API documentation. We have a /API, /Swagger, index.html, /OpenAPI, JSON, all these different possibilities to try and find API documentation. Be thorough, start from top to bottom, right? So let's go ahead and try the first one over on our lab. We have a /API. So coming over here, I will simply add on to our URL /API. And of course, as all courses and academies are, typically they're not too difficult as long as you follow the instructions and actually read the material. You can see that we have found 3 different ways that we can interact with this API. Notice that on the user route, if we send in a parameter of the username with a get method, we would be able to get information on that user. And then we could also delete users if we sent a delete method in our HTTP request, and even update the user's email. Okay, so let me go ahead and come back to the shop. Let's go to my account. Let me log in as Wiener with Peter as the password. And using our API documentation, we can gather more information on our user profile using this route here. So /API /user /Wiener. And by default, when I send this request, it will be a get method. Sending in the request, we actually see some JSON data being sent back with the username and the email. This makes me curious because what if we were to change the parameter that the API is using to process my request? So here we see we're looking to delete Carlos. Okay, so we know another username. Let's go ahead and try Carlos. And sure thing, we are now able to see the username and email of Carlos. Now the issue here is that by default, the browser is sending a GET request. But in order for me to actually delete the user Carlos, we would need to be using a delete method. So we would need some way to modify the request to change the method from get to delete. And in order to do that, we will be using Burp Suite. So go ahead, download it. I'm not gonna waste your time with how to do all that. Just go download it, super simple, and go ahead and run it up. The community edition is free. I did notice that in some of the lessons here on Web Security Academy from Portswigger, that they do talk about features that are only available in the paid version. But you don't need the paid version. You can still do everything for free with the community edition. Push through all of the defaults, go ahead and get it started. Now you have a few ways that you can approach this, okay? If this is your first time looking at Burp Suite, you may be a little bit intimidated by all the different buttons and tabs and all these different windows. And if you feel that way, know that it's totally normal, right? This is going to be a long journey. It's going to take some commitment. It's going to take some time. So to go ahead and get started with intercepting the requests, the easiest way that you can do it without having to configure a proxy within your own browser is you can just use the Chromium browser that is built into Burp Suite. So coming over into the proxy tab, we will go ahead and open browser. This will open a Chromium browser, which has already the certificates and the proxy set up to allow all traffic to flow through Burp Suite if we were to turn on interception. But for now, let's keep it off. Let's go over into Portswigger's website and you're going to want to log in to your account. Okay, so you'll notice that HTTPS is showing as insecure, and that's because the certificate is coming from Burp Suite. It's not coming from the official Portswigger domain. So if you see this, know that this is the reason for that warning. You can safely ignore it and proceed on into your account. Go back to where you were before in the Academy. So I'll go ahead and log in. Let's go back into that API endpoint and try to intercept that request and delete Carlos. So we will turn on our intercept before we send that request. Sending it over, we see that request has been captured by Burp Suite right here. Here in the header, we see the get method, which we need to modify to be a delete method instead. Now that we've adjusted that header, let's go ahead and forward the request through to the server. And notice we have a success. User has been deleted. If we were to try and do a GET request on that user one more time, let me go ahead and turn off interception. Let's go into API, user, Carlos. That user is not found. And I'm sure you saw it. You'll actually get your congratulations. You solved the lab. We're going to go ahead and do just one more. I think you'll enjoy this last one a lot. I also should mention that if you struggled with that, first of all, congratulations for sticking through it. And also, you have the solution here after you figured it out, right? Like, unless you have a headache, don't go looking at the solution. Try to figure it out on your own. Develop that callus. Try harder. And once you've tried your hardest, then you can go read through the solution and see if there was a more efficient way in which you could have done this lab. So it looks like in this solution, they were actually showing that we could have went through the HTTP history and then sent the request through the repeater. Going ahead and moving on, let's go into understanding more about APIs, how we can exploit them, just reading the material, really appreciating what we have here for free. And then let's go into our last lab right here. It's going to be talking about how we can use things like errors, how we can adjust content types to expose different errors, how we can change the methods on known API routes to try and get different unintended behavior from the web application. Now, for this lab, we are looking to exploit a hidden API endpoint to buy a lightweight leather jacket. Okay, we're going to go ahead and log in with these credentials. To solve this lab, you will need to have read the previous pages so that you can understand how to use error messages to construct a valid request, how HTTP methods are used by APIs, and then also how changing the HTTP method can reveal some additional functionality. Noticing our intercept is off, let's go ahead and access the lab. So part of how we're going to do this is by seeing how it works before we try hacking it. Okay, so here is the lightweight elite leather jacket for $1,337. Let's just see how it works if I were to try and purchase it. So here's a little description. Let me go ahead and add one to the cart. All right, coming out to the cart, we would try and place the order. Okay, it says I need to log in to continue. Yes, we learned that from before. Logging in with our known credentials. Let's come back to my cart and we will try to place the order. And here we see that not enough store credit for this purchase. Okay, so we need to try and buy this leather jacket, but we don't got no money because we haven't hit any good bug bounties yet. So we're looking to somehow get around that. One of the approaches I'm thinking is we could either find a way to give ourselves some store credit, right? What if there's an API point that I could interact with getting more store credit? Another thing we could do is look to somehow maybe change the price of the leather jacket. So let me go ahead and remove this. Okay, coming back into the home page, let's go ahead and turn on the intercept and see what types of URLs are being used throughout this entire process. I'm going to go ahead and put this to the side, put this here, turn intercept on, and let's go into exactly what gets processed. Selecting our leather jacket, we see that a GET request is being sent on the host slash product with a parameter of product ID equals 1. Okay. Now we see another API route right here. It's trying to send a GET request to slash API products slash 1 slash price. So that one's pretty interesting. It's a GET method. And over in our Academy training, we saw, let me go ahead and turn this off. Over in our Academy training, we saw that what we could do is try to find other HTTP methods that could be applied to that API route. So we found API price, which was normally a GET method, but what if we could apply changes to that resource using a patch? Okay, so let's come back and let's do that one more time. Let me turn on intercept. Let me refresh the page. Okay, we have our GET request for the product, and then we have our GET request for price. What I'm going to do before I process this request, I'm going to go ahead and send it over to the repeater tool. Now, repeater is going to allow me to repeat this request over and over until I find something that may be unique. So let's go ahead and try changing this from a GET request to a patch. So changing the method from GET to patch, we will send that request over, and we see an error of content type application JSON is supported. Only application JSON content type is supported. Okay, so the fact that we got an error here showing me that it's expecting application JSON content type is already a really good sign for us. So let's go ahead and add in to our header a content type, and this will be application JSON. And let's just put in an empty JSON object. Going ahead and repeating this request again, sending it over the patch with the content type application JSON and the empty JSON object. We get a different error this time, saying that the price parameter is missing in the body. Ooh, okay. So going ahead, let's give it what it wants. Let's add a key to our JSON object of price, and let's set it to 0. Repeating our request once again, we will now send this patch over with a content type of application JSON, a object with price set to 0, and our fingers crossed. This time we get a success, 200. Price is 0. Let me go ahead over into our proxy. Let me turn off interception, refresh the page, and notice now the price for this leather jacket is in fact 0. No store credit needed. Adding this to the cart, going into the cart, purchasing the jacket, and our lab has been solved. So again, really awesome resource. I wish I found this months ago, dude. I would be way more ahead. And with that, guys, I hope you had a wonderful time. Don't forget to tell all your friends, smash like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.